بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم اجعلنا من الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم اجعلنا منهم ومن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم ثبتنا عند الموت بلا إله إلا الله آمين يا رب العالمين. ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is our third get-together for the study of Surah Al-ASR. Hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, our final get-together. It'll be my best attempt to complete the study of the surah today. But we'll go as, I won't try to rush anything. We'll see how far we get, inshallah ta'ala. Those of you that have been following along, we were up to Inna al-Insan. That's what we covered last time we left off there. We discussed the usage of the word Inna in the ayah and the usage of the word Al-Insan. And we left it there. Now we're dealing with the part Lafi Khusr. Lafi Khusr. So, roughly translated, no doubt every single human being is truly immersed in loss. The first thing to note here is the tools in Arabic language that are being used to emphasize this statement. If you have in English, you have the human being is in loss. That's a statement. But in Arabic, you don't just have a statement. You have a statement and it can be empowered by certain tools. It can be made stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. Similarly, also in Arabic rhetoric, a statement can be made weaker and weaker and weaker. It can be strengthened, it can also be weakened. This statement, grammatically speaking, is the strongest it could possibly be. First of all, there are two kinds of sentences in Arabic, jumla fi'liya and ismiya. This is ismiya. There's the noun-based sentence and a verb-based sentence. And in rhetorically speaking, the noun-based sentence is stronger than the verb-based sentence. Normally, the Arabs use the verb-base when they speak. And in unusual occasions, they will use the noun-base. It's stronger. This is a noun-base. It's jumla ismiya. It's got a mubtada and a khabar. This is the first thing that makes it stronger. The second is, instead of saying al-insanu fi khusr, it's inna al-insan. This is harf at-tawkid. This is a preposition used only for the purpose of strengthening what you're about to say. So there's a second reason that it's stronger. The third reason that it's stronger is the word al-insan has al on it, which is lil-jins, which we'll read the commentary of the Mufassirun, and we'll see that it implies every single human being. Instead of saying a person or people, it's every single human being, adding another degree of emphasis. Then on top of that you have lafi. It's not just fi khusr, it is lafi khusr. This lam, typically you have the word the word fi rather. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. There's just fi. But this is lafi. Lam here is very difficult to translate, but it basically has the same function rhetorically as inna. Certainly. Lam, according to some linguists in Arabic, it is also argued it's used to swear on top of an oath. So for example, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا, lam is already an oath in and of itself, or used in response to an oath. So it's a means by which something is empowered. Another tool of empowerment. Then you have, it's not إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَخَاسِرٍ. The human being is a loser. Or even the khabar could have been a verb. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَقَدْ خَسَرَ. Or khasira rather. Right? The human being has lost. لَفِي خُسْرٍ. He is in loss. The imagery used, we talked about that last time, the one who's being drowned, he's immersed in it. Someone being a loser is one thing. And by the way, ism fa'il in Arabic, it implies something that's happening right now. But by using the preposition, it becomes a constant state. He is immersed in it. He's been in it. He's going to stay in it kind of thing. It's a scenario that's being depicted. So the word fi here adds to that. Then there's, Al-Madhari comments, fi khusrin, the tanween, yufidul azma. The tanween at the end, khusr isn't just loss, it's incredible loss. Just because there's tanween at the end, khusrin, because of that. So one after another mechanism by which this statement has been emphasized. And above and beyond all of that, Allah began with wal-asr, by taking an oath. And the oath, among other things, is also a manifestation of anger. We talked about the other purposes of the oath last time, but another manifestation of the oath is anger. For example, even nowadays you're talking to each other, I swear, you better stop. I swear I'm going to get you, When you use the I swear, it's a manifestation of anger. So the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal swears before He mentions the loss of the human being in and of itself is a means by which this statement is emphasized. So there are tools by which the statement is emphasized over and over and over and over again. The human being is in loss, or verily the human being or man is at loss, mankind is in doom, etc., etc. Don't even begin to cover the rage and the terror that is embedded in the language of this ayah. That Allah Azza wa Jalla depicts in the words, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. Let's talk a little bit about the word khusr. In the original session I told you there's a difference between the word khusr that's used here, then there's the word khusran that occurs in the Quran also, and then there's the word khasara. And the difference between them, just as a quick recap, khusran is the worst kind of loss. So for example, Allah says, خَسِرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْخُسْرَانِ. He lost the dunya and the akhirah, that is the ultimate loss. That's the worst kind of loss. That's not for everyone, but that's for the worst kind of person, then khusran is used. Khasar is used when you are already in trouble and you add to your trouble. So for example, وَاتَّبَعُوا مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْهُ مَالُهُ وَوَلَدُهُ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. It's used with ziyada usually. It didn't increase them in anything but loss. Meaning they were already in trouble, it added to their trouble. It's used in that sense. But khusr is the base form. Meaning generally all human beings are in a state of tremendous loss. So khasira, the way it's used in Arabic, is also used in the meaning of suffering, in addition to loss. Loss is the common translation. Khasira fi bay'ihi also means he suffered loss in his business. It also means to lose your capital altogether. We made reference to this before also. You put your money in a business. Not only does it not make money, but you lose all your investment money also. This is called khusr. If you lost, just the profits, you broke even, this is not called khusr. If you lost the money you put in of your own, all of it is gone too. The essential capital, what's called in Arabic, ra'sul mal. If that is gone, then that's called khusr. It's also, by the way, used when you are conned. Like if you say khasirat tijaratuhu, it's one of the meanings of that is his business went under, but it also means his business was destroyed by means of some kind of trickery. Somebody conned him, somebody deceived him, and that made his business go down. So there's this allusion to deception also in the word khusr. Human beings are deceiving themselves. They're in a kind of deception, and that's leading them to a loss. The antonym, the opposite of khasirat tijaratuhu is rabihat tijaratuhu. His business became profitable. That he not only put his money in, he got more out of it too. So Allah Azza wa Jalla uses this word. This is a little bit about the word khusran. Let's talk a little bit about the word al-insan in the ayah, just as we talked about it linguistically before, but just what the ulama have said. Al-insanu lil-jins, anna an-nasa fi khusran min tijaratihim. First, al-insan lil-jins. That this word insan is referring to all human beings. So when Allah says the human being is no doubt in deep trouble, in deep loss, there is no exception. Because the jins in Arabic means the entire category. No one should think when they read the ayah, not me, somebody else. I can think of my neighbor, I can think of these other kuffar that are in trouble. That's not the idea when you use the word jins. It is a universal statement. Then the second, we read this in Zamakhshari also, أَنَّ النَّاسَ فِي خُسْرَانٍ مِنْ تِجَارَتِهِمْ إِلَّا الصَّالِحِينَ وَحْدَهُمْ. That people are in tremendous loss because of the trades they make. In other words, they put their money and their effort and their time into things that they think will bring them profit, but they bring them nothing but loss. إِلَّا الصَّالِحِينَ, except for the righteous, وَحْدَهُمْ, them alone. May Allah make us from them. لِأَنَّهُمُ اشْتَرَاوُا الْآخِرَةَ بِالدُّنْيَا. Because those are the people who, which trade did they do? They purchased the akhirah in exchange for giving up the pleasures of dunya. That's the transaction that the salihin made. فَرَبِحُوا وَسَعِدُوا. That then they were profitable and they were happy. وَمَنْ عَدَاهُمْ تَجَرُّوا خِلَافَ تِجَارَتِهِمْ. And then whoever was an enemy against them, who stood against this transaction of theirs, فَوَقَعُوا فِي الْخَسَارَ وَالشَّقَاوَةِ. Then they remained in loss and in despair. Then we read something from Ash-Shawkani, وَالْمَعْنَى أَنَّ كُلَّ إِنسَانٍ فِي الْمَتَاجِرِ وَالْمَسَاعِ. Beautiful words. He says that this means that every human being is in an act of selling and trading and making efforts constantly. Meaning they're competing in making more sales than the other, and they're competing in getting ahead from the other. This is what they're lost in. And if you remember, this is very similar to what we talked about in At-Takathur. His tafsir of this word is very similar to what we already read in At-Takathur. وَصَرَفَ الْأَعْمَارِ فِي أَعْمَالِ الدُّنْيَا. And he exhausts his ages By a'mar, he's referring to his age, meaning youth is one age, maturity is one age, middle age is one age, then old age and senility. He exhausts all of his life's opportunities in the works of dunya, lafi nuqs, and all of them that have been exhausted. وَصَرْفُ أَعْمَارٍ فِي أَعْمَالِ الدُّنْيَا لَفِي nuqs. They are all in loss. وَضَلَالٍ, and in waste. عَنِ الْحَقِّ حَتَّى يَمُوتْ, and he's misled from the truth until he dies, and then he wakes up. وَقِيلَ الْمُرَادْ بِالْإِنسَانِ الْكَافِرِ. We talked about this before, but it's coming up directly from the Mufassirun now. It has also been said that the insan in this surah refers to the kafir. That the meaning of al-insan, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. Some have understood this as إِنَّ الْكَافِرَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. وَقِيلَ جَمَاعَةٌ مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ. It's also been said it's a group from the kuffar. وَهُمُ الْوَلِيدْ بن المغيرة والعاص بن وائل والأسود بن عبد المطلب بن أسد. وَالْأَوَّلُ أُولَى. Others say that no, this is a group from the kuffar, specifically in the life of the Prophet, like Walid ibn Mughira, Aas ibn Wa'il, Aswad bin Abdul Muttalib. These are the kinds of individuals, la'anahumullah, that are being referred to in this surah. But even Ash-Shawkani rahimahullah says, but the first meaning is preferred among these who say they are kuffar. The ones who generally refer to the kuffar is the preferred meaning. But then even that has a criticism which we'll get to. وَقَالَ الْأَخْفَشْ فِي خُسْرٍ فِي هَلَكَ. Al-Akhfash rahimahullah says, when Allah says fi khusr, he is in loss, what he means by that is he is in destruction. Halaka. Halak actually literally means violent death. There's maut, that's death. But halak is violent death, like a death in a car accident or, a vicious kind of death. So he's setting himself up for this vicious end. وَقَالَ الْفَرَّاء عُقُوبَةً. And Farra says that this is a terrible ending. Uquba means a consequence, an ending that is scary for others to watch. In other words, one's end, that when other people see this, I don't want to end up like that. And you use his uquba as an example among yourselves. You say, you remember what happened to him? You don't want to go down that road, that kind of thing. So this is uquba. Then Ibn Zayd rahimahullah, he says, lafi shar. Lafi khusr here implies lafi shar, that he is immersed in evil. Because the ultimate loss of the human being is his engrossment in evil deeds. We read something from Ash-Shaqiqi rahimahullah. لَفْظَ الْإِنسَانِ وَإِنْ كَانَ مُنْفَرِدًا فَإِنَّ أَلْفِهِ جُعِلَتْهُ لِلْجِنْسِ. The word al-insan, even though it's singular, it has been used for all humanity, generally speaking. Then we come to a very, very important comment that is made by Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, and it's so powerful that's even quoted by Mufti Muhammad Shafi' in his Urdu Tafseer, Ma'arif al-Quran. The translation of which is also available in English. It's not the best English, so if you can read the Urdu tafsir, Ma'arif al-Quran. But those of you who don't have access to that language, at least something of the English is available. What is this comment that is so beautiful that I'm referring to by Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah? He says that humanity is kept from accepting the truth of this deen by two obstacles. There are two obstacles that keep human beings from saving themselves. Now, what is the path to save yourself? There are two things. Those are, in the Quran we find, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا what's after what? عَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. This is what we find all over the Quran, right? They believe and they act. They believe and they act. Even though we haven't talked in detail what iman is Allah referring to, what righteous deed is Allah referring to. We're just using them as terms, as tags and phrases right now. But generally, this is the path to salvation. This is the path to save yourself and be successful in the akhirah. The first step, iman. The second step, action. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah argues there are two obstacles before the people that keep them from iman and action. What are those two obstacles? He calls them shubuhat and shahawat. Shubuhat and shahawat. What does that mean? Shubuhat means doubts. Shahawat means temptations, desires. So he says the two things that keep people from accepting the truth are doubts and temptations. What does he mean by that? You see, when you ask someone to accept this deen, you're asking them to give up a lot of things. You're asking them really to give up a lot of things. I had a friend in college, big guy, really loved football, and you used to talk about Islam all the time. And I said, man, why don't you just accept Islam? I can't give up that pork, man. I just can't give it up. That's some good stuff. What's his obstacle? He's not in doubt. His obstacle is not doubt. He's convinced this is good. His obstacle is his temptation. Another one says, I can't give up the life of partying. I can't give up the women. I can't give up the clubs. I can't give up the drugs. I can't give up this or that or the other. These are desires. On the one hand, there's a person who says, this is right, but I cannot live by this because the gravitational pull of temptation is just too strong for me. This is one problem. Here's another problem. Here's a person who doesn't accept what this is, because he's not sure if this is the truth. They'll say, how do you know yours is the only right religion? There are so many religions out there. What about them? What about all those people? They're going to just go to hell? That's what you believe? I can't accept that. I'm not sure how can there be just one right way? No, if there was just one right way, why wouldn't everybody just follow it? These kinds of questions come in this person's mind. And they fall into what? Doubt. This is the root of doubt. Either one of these things will keep you from the deen. Either one of these things. And by the way, most people, the problem is in doubt. Most people, the problem is temptations. And then when they fall into their temptations, shaitan comes in and adds a new virus, which is doubt. So when you call them to the deen, they say, I am in doubt, but the real problem wasn't doubt. What was it? The temptations. So in other words, there's a psychological problem and there's an intellectual problem. You could also call it a spiritual problem, a problem of the heart, which is temptation. There's an intellectual problem, a problem of the mind, which is doubt. Most people that give the excuse of the intellectual doubt, actually that's not true. That's a cover, that's a facade. The real problem is their hearts have desires. And they don't want to give up their desires, and to cover that up, they make all kinds of intellectual excuses. And when you get rid of all of them, the truth comes out that it was really their desire. I don't want to change. I don't want to change. This is his, sad state that he doesn't want to come out of. Now, why mention this in the midst of this surah? You see, at the end, Allah says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, but He mentioned two more things, didn't He? وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah argues, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. Truth is the removal of what? Doubt. Truth is the weapon against doubt. So what tawasi bil-haq gets rid of one obstacle. And what was the other obstacle? Shahawat, temptations, desires. To fight against those desires, knowing the truth is not enough, what must you have? The strength to not fall into them. The strength to hold back, to control yourself. Where does that come from? وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. You see how beautifully those two obstacles that keep people from iman and a'mal al-salihah, they are mentioned in وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ and وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. This is the comment that I felt was very, very important for us to understand. Now we're going to look at some other commentary. I'm going to go just through my notes so I don't miss anything, inshallah ta'ala. The first comment just about this ayah. You see, in these two ayat, Allah Azza wa Jalla has depicted a very powerful reality. And one element of that is that human beings are so preoccupied with their personal problems. Allah says human beings are in loss, right? But it's, we're thinking about the hellfire and the day of judgment and all of that. But even the way Allah created the human being in this earth, before He has also said, we've already studied, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. We created the human being, no doubt, in toil, in labor. Even the kafir has to work hard. You gotta, work 40 hours, 50 hours to get a paycheck and barely survive, barely make an income. That's their state too. It's not easy for anyone. So even, and there are people in the world who are Muslim or non-Muslim that barely get food to eat, or they see their children starving, and they see all kinds of oppression. So it's not like for the kuffar, all the kuffar, this world is Jannah also. They're also in loss even in worldly terms. They suffer a lot of problems. But you know what happens? Human beings, when they completely immerse themselves in their own problems, that's all they think about is themselves. Then they fail to see that they are part of a larger picture. And they fail to see that their problems are nothing compared to the problems that are lying ahead. You think this is a problem? There's way bigger lying ahead. So they think they are in loss now, but if you put it in perspective, it's nothing compared to the loss that is coming. This is the first thing that we want to make note of. Then, you know what happens when you don't have iman, when you don't have this key that we're going to talk about in the next ayah, your problems get blown out of proportion. You think I've got some really big problems. I get reminded, even human beings are weak. We have these kinds of things. And when I still live in Maryland, our basement, it flooded. Right? And I was like, oh my God, the carpet's wet, it's soggy, this, that, the other. Alhamdulillah, we don't have basements in Texas, so it's cool. But so basement, and I called this brother to help out, get rid of the water and stuff. And I'm all stressed out, the kids are upstairs and, electronics and this and that. And the brother comes, and the brother is a good brother, alhamdulillah, he's happens to be from Somalia. He's a really good, handyman. And he helps out with the Islamic school in the masjid there. And the brother's helping out. And he says, you look worried, akhi. And I was like, yeah, it's all this problem. He goes, don't worry about water, akhi. You can't fight water. It killed Fir'aun. And we just started talking. And we're talking, and he tells me his life story. Subhanallah, subhanallah. He was like 5 years old when his village was attacked by enemy tribes. And he survived on the back of a donkey hiding in hay. And he's traveled as a kid. His parents were executed. He was the only child left in the family. From 5 years old, he's been living on his own, just traveling like half of Africa. He went to Ethiopia. He ended up in like the Khalij. He started working for a sheikh, learned some little bit of trade, became an engineer. He's got the craziest story. You know, and when you hear his story, you say, man, I got no problems. You get immersed in your problems, and you blow them out of proportion. And this is another loss of the human being. He is at a loss to see that what problems he has are nothing compared to what's out there. He fails to see the gratitude that Allah Azza wa Jal, he owes Allah Azza wa Jal. And when this happens, when human beings are so preoccupied with their own life, their own problems, they fail to see the lessons in three things. The three things I want to highlight to you. The first is the lessons in the creation of Allah. They no longer look at the creation of Allah as signs that remind you what your real purpose in life is. What are the real problems that you should avoid? Financial problems are nothing. Health problems are nothing. The problem of Iman is something big. In comparison, this is nothing compared to that problem. You know? You have social problems is nothing. You know, job problem is nothing. Compared to the problem that I'm immersed in evil deeds and I need to start doing good deeds to save myself, that's a much bigger problem. And the ayat of Allah, the creations of Allah, when you reflect on them, naturally what happens is you remember your Creator, you remember what you owe Him and where you're headed. They fail to see the creations around them as signs. Another thing they fail to see is the lessons of history, which is actually what this surah is highlighting. When Allah says, وَالْعَصْرِ, remember the word asr, time as it passes away? If you just reflect on history and how many people have come and failed and have gone. They had a little bit of time to become a success and they didn't make use of that time and they failed and they're gone and their chance is over. Then a new generation came with a new chance and they lost their chance and their time was over. And now it's my turn. I have a chance. I better not make the mistake that these people made, which is why Allah tells me of the nations of the past who lost the opportunity. You know, Allah is alluding to all of those historic accounts in the Quran, just in the word wal-asr. Because all of them, their ultimate loss was not availing the time that they had, before it gets too late. You know, min qabli an ya'tiya, adabun alim. Before a punishment comes, avail that time. And finally, of course, the signs of revelation. When you're too preoccupied with your own life, you fail to look at the Quran, you fail to look at revelation, you fail to look at the legacy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for guidance of how should I live my life, what should I aspire towards. Because if your only concern is your career, you're really not going to get career advice in programming from the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? You're not going to get that from the Quran. But if you're looking for where should I spend my money, how should I raise my kids? How should I be to my neighbor? What more do I owe my parents? When you start thinking, what good can I do? Then you turn to the book. Then you turn to the Messenger ﷺ. So this preoccupation with the self, in and of itself, is a loss of the human being. Then, as far as, one of the beautiful things I want to comment on also is a statement from Shah Waliullah Dahlwi rahimahullah. Talking about asr, the word asr in this ayah, and connecting it with the loss of the human being, Shah Waliullah Dahlwi rahimahullah has a term he uses for certain passages of the Quran. He calls them at-tadhkir bi-ayyamillah, reminder by the days of Allah. Reminder by the days of Allah. What are the days of Allah? It is the day He created the human being, the day on which He sent revelation to His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the day of Badr, the day on which the flood came to the disbelievers against Nuh alayhi salam, the day when the water was parted, the day when Fir'aun was destroyed, etc. The day when Musa alayhi salam spoke to Allah azza wa jal. These are amazing days in human history. And Allah refers to these awesome days all over the book, doesn't He? Of course, in the future there are also amazing days coming. The day of judgment, the day on which the believers will get to see their Lord, etc., etc. These are incredible occasions of time. And by using wal-asr, and to save ourselves that warning, it is if we only remembered those days of Allah, they would be enough for us to not fall into loss, to keep things in perspective. That's the commentary of Shah Waliullah Dahlwi rahimahullah. And finally, something Hamiduddin Farahi said, which also I found very, very beautiful. He said one of the lessons of this